Most of us accept bruises, stubbed toes, and paper cuts as normal parts of our life, or a brief interruption to our day. But some have been unlucky enough to endure unexpected and unusual injuries that changed the course of their lives. Phineas Gage was a regular, hard-working member of the railroad crew until he suffered a shocking, accidental injury in 1848 that permanently altered his life and identity. Gage and his co-workers were preparing the space for a new set of railroad tracks when an accidental explosion occurred as Gage brushed a rock containing blasting powder with his iron tamping tool. This led to the rod sparking up like a rocket, striking Gage and entering his head under the left cheekbone. The rod pierced through his skull and brain, ultimately coming out through the top of his head, severely damaging his frontal lobe, the part of the brain just behind the forehead. This rod was about 3.5 feet long, and it weighed approximately 13 pounds. His injury appeared grave and likely deadly to his co-workers, but they noticed that he was still able to walk and talk. After his crew rushed him to medical help, he was greeted by Dr. Edward H. Williams, who conversed with him while loose chunks of his brain were removed. Though his condition appeared completely stable at first, a few days later Gage developed an infection that put him in a semi-coma for 10 days. At this point, his recovery was put in the hands of a different doctor, J.M. Harlow. After regaining consciousness, it only took Gage 4 days to regain his ability to walk, and about a week later all of his cognitive functions started working like normal. Dr. Harlow noticed one thing was still out of shape: his personality. Before the accident, Gage's crew described him as hardworking and responsible, but now he was unsettled, profane and disrespectful. Completely new person, it seemed. He was transferred to his parents' home to recover, where his personality evolved even further away from the person he was known to be. Now Gage had no reservation on his words and actions, and he grew even more demanding. Due to his new, uncivil personality, Gage struggled to find work. But the story of his incident had spread so widely and bought him so much fame that he was able to sell himself as a tourist attraction, traveling the country with an iron rod. By some reports, Gage's personality phased back to normal after spending some time at his parents' house, which allowed him to take more typical employment, such as a stagecoach job. Despite Gage's apparent return, his physical health eventually started to decline. Almost a whole decade after his accident, he started suffering from epileptic seizures, the severity of which ultimately led to his death at the age of 36. Terrible as this accident was, it led to an important discovery in the scientific community. Because his personality changed as a result of an injury to the brain's frontal lobe, scientists now had an idea of what the frontal lobe was used for: social behavior. Today, his name is still well known among scientists, and his skull and iron rod can still be seen displayed at Harvard Warren's Anatomical Museum. Anatoly Bugorsky is a Russian scientist who created an unusual case study of himself in 1978. This was when he stuck his head in a particle accelerator, a machine designed for research that can quickly create a beam of electrically charged particles. This accident expanded our knowledge of physics because this sort of radiation injury was practically unheard of before this. Previously, scientists would have only been able to offer best guesses of what would happen to someone if any part of them entered a particle accelerator. Their guesses certainly were fairly grim based on the fact that proton radiation can break the chemical bonds of DNA, which can kill cells or lead to cancers. Bugorsky came in contact with this particle accelerator because of his job at the Institute for High Energy Physics in Russia. He noticed it was having a problem, so to see what was going wrong, he put his head inside. He didn't know the accelerator was running because the hazard lights had been switched off for a different experiment. His head intersected with an invisible proton beam that invaded through the back of his head and left through his nose. Vygorsky reported the incident as painless, but noted seeing a flash brighter than 1,000 suns. It's thought that during this accident, he absorbed more radiation than any other human has ever experienced, up to 300 times the amount that can normally kill someone. Scientists believe he survived because he was struck by a focused beam, which meant he took all the damage to one small area, instead of his entire body. His symptoms started with swelling on the left side of his face, but doctors noticed a hole burned through his brain that destroyed tissue, leading to the paralysis of half his face. He also lost hearing in his left ear and developed epilepsy. Luckily, all his intellectual functions remain intact, and he lives to this day. As disturbing and distressing as the incident was, Vygotsky's experience contributed to human knowledge by answering the question of what happens to humans exposed to intense and focused radiation. It's certainly a rare phenomenon, as most people don't have access to a particle accelerator, let alone one with conveniently broken hazard signs. As a scientist himself, Vygotsky might at least be able to take some solace in his accident's scientific value. Vesna Vlahovic for 27 people. The 1972 explosion of the Yugoslav Airlines DC-9 airplane flying above Czechoslovakia meant instant death. But for one person, Vesna Vlahovic, it meant severe injuries sustained for a 16-month-long recovery period, and a forever changed life full of guilt and fame. After the DC-9 exploded, it plunged 33,000 feet and ultimately crashed into a snowy mountain, where all passengers and crew, except for Vlahovic, were sucked out of the plane into sub-freezing temperatures to their deaths. Vlahovic was one of the flight attendants on board the aircraft, and at the time of the crash was in the plane's tail with the food carts. It's believed that one of the food carts aided her in her survival, as it wedged her in place where all the others were forcefully ejected from the plane in the blast. On the way down, trees helped to break the fall of the plane's tail, and once it hit the hill, it was cushioned by deep snow, all contributing to her survival. The survival after a 33,000-foot drop is recognized by the Guinness World Record as the longest non-fatal fall without a parachute. The cause of the incident isn't entirely known. Czech authority determined the explosives in her suitcase were set off, tearing the plane apart and leading to its plummet. But independent investigators drew the conclusion that the aircraft was accidentally shot down by the Czechoslovak Air Force at only 2,625 feet. Though Vlahovic survived, she was found far from peak condition. When she was found by villager Bruno Honk, who followed the sound of her screams, she was already suffering from a skull fracture, broken legs, 3 broken vertebrae, and paralysis from the waist down. She entered into a coma, and when she woke up, she had no memory of the flight. However, in less than a year, she had recovered enough to regain her ability to walk, albeit with a limp. Later that year, she returned to work for the airline, now in an office job. Though she wished to return to her old job as a flight attendant, as she still had no memory of the flight and therefore no fear of planes, the airline refused her, knowing the celebrity status she gained from the crash would bring too much publicity to the accident. After all, everyone in Yugoslavia knew of her and what she'd been through. She had received a decoration from the president of Yugoslavia, and Serbian folk singer recorded his song, Vesna the Stewardess, in her honor. While her sudden fame and new identity as a local hero hindered her ability to continue the career she had chosen for herself, she was able to use this attention to work successfully as a pro-democracy activist. This led to her firing from the airline for anti-government speech. While a normal citizen of Yugoslavia would be arrested for these transgressions, her hero status prevented this. Her arrest just didn't seem worth the immense public backlash that would have followed. While she may seem extremely lucky to have beaten the odds, surpassing the record for the highest who survived, it may have been bad luck that put her on that flight in the first place. She wasn't even scheduled to attend the flight. A different flight attendant should have been on board. She reminded others that while she may have escaped long-term physical harm in the flight, she didn't escape mental harm. Losing her job was just the beginning. Her recovery strained her family and their finances. Both her parents died prematurely within years of the accident, and she believed the distress from her accident played a part in this. She also enjoyed the trauma of survival guilt and turned to Orthodox Christianity to cope with it. Still, before she died in 2016 at the age of 66, she passed down an inspiring message. Though the crash negatively impacted her life in multiple ways, she stated that it also inspired optimism in her. She knew now that if she could survive what she did, people could get through anything. Remember these stories and remind yourself that the human body can prevail over much worse. So what do you make of these crazy accidents and how they all survived? Some of the most interesting historical stories come from past experiences dealing with outer space. Scientists have made significant discoveries over the years, performed valuable experiments, and they experienced failures as well. All of these experiences have been combined to help scientists continue making new discoveries. Vanguard TV3. As part of the International Geophysical Year from 1957 to 1958, scientists planned to conduct geophysical studies all around the world. Scientists everywhere agreed to exchange any information they learned freely because this information could be used to make important scientific discoveries. One of the goals of the program was to launch a satellite into orbit. They quickly got work onto launching their own satellites called the project was managed by the Navy and the Department of Defense, and it was funded by the National Science Foundation. The satellites were built at the Naval Research Laboratory, also known as the NRL. They used mercury-style batteries, radio transmitters, a temp crystal, and solar cells. The launch vehicles were also built at the NRL. All the tests were performed there too. The Vanguard TV3 had a few different purposes. One was to test the capabilities of a three-stage launch vehicle called the Vanguard. This vehicle was designed to lift through the densest layers of the atmosphere in around 130 seconds. It would then ultimately rise up to 480 kilometers above the Earth. After the final stage, it would boost the Vanguard TV3 into orbit at around 180,000 miles per hour and keep a consistent distance from the Earth. Or TV3 would be used for research to find out how the environment impacts satellites and their orbits around the Earth. While orbiting, it would also help researchers study micrometeoroid impacts, and it would take geodetic measurements. The original plan was to launch several of these satellites during the International Geophysical Year. This was so researchers could get a fuller picture of these studies and measurements. The Vanguard TV3 was launched on December 6, 1957 in Florida. It made around 4 feet off the ground before its main engine lost power. It exploded as it landed back on the launch pad due to the fuel tanks rupturing, and the satellite was destroyed. Although there were many theories, no one could quite figure out exactly why this happened. However, it was believed to have had something to do with a low fuel tank pressure, or at least fuel line. The timing couldn't have been worse. While working on the project, the Soviet Union surprised everyone by successfully launching Sputnik 1 that October. They then launched Sputnik 2 the following month. The United States government felt more pressure to get their project off the ground and launch their own satellite. They wanted to get ahead in the race to space. This failed project truly added insult and was a disappointment for all Americans. Today, the satellite can be found on display at the Smithsonian Air and Space Museum. The first image of Earth from the Moon. In the 1960s, NASA was preparing to send astronauts to the Moon for the first time. In order to do this safely, they needed high-resolution photos to make sure the surface of the Moon was safe to land on, and to help them pick potential landing spots. These photos would help prepare the astronauts for their trip to the Moon, and this would take place in 1969. Boeing and Eastman Kodak had already developed a spacecraft for the Department of Defense that contained its own camera system, and researchers were able to use this for their mission. NASA launched Lunar Orbiter 1, the first of 5 lunar orbiters, on August 10, 1966. It took the orbiter 92 hours to get close enough to orbit the Moon. Some described it as flying photography labs. The orbiters took photos with dual lenses, one taking wide angles at a medium resolution and the other taking high-resolution photos of small details. They took photos, developed and processed them themselves. The whole process was similar to developing photos from Polaroid cameras. The photos were then scanned and transmitted back to Earth through radio signals. Using photos from all 5 orbiters, researchers were able to put together a somewhat detailed map of around 99% of the Moon. They also succeeded in finding at least 20 potential spots to land. During this mission, NASA had the idea of pointing Lunar Orbiter 1's camera at the Earth. There were risks involved, and they weren't sure if they'd be able to reposition the camera once they did this. They ultimately decided it was worth the risk, since getting an image of the Earth like this would be a significant achievement. They agreed that no one would be blamed if their plan didn't work. Lunar Orbiter 1 took the first image of the Earth from the Moon on August 23, 1966. This was during its 16th orbit. It was taken from around 236,000 miles away and shows half of Earth covered in darkness. Before this, there was only ever one photo taken of Earth, taken by a satellite in 1946, but that photo only depicted a grainy image of the surface of the Earth. The photo taken by Lunar Orbiter 1 showed the Earth as a round planet taken from deep space. This photo changed the way people viewed the Earth. It brought into perspective the fact that Earth is just another planet floating in the galaxy. While scientists had only really been focused on looking at other planets and moons, this photo showed the importance of viewing our own planet from other perspectives. The value of this photo couldn't be overstated. Miss Baker the monkey. By 1959, scientists in the United States had been attempting to send animals to space for around 10 years already. Every mission proved to be unsuccessful for one reason or another. In one case, a monkey's parachute failed and it died on impact. In another, a monkey fell into the sea and was never found. Still, there was one case where the monkeys did in fact come back to Earth safely. However, they hadn't been high enough to reach space. Unfortunately for America, the Soviet Union had already proved to be successful in this mission. They had at least 30 cases where animals returned from space alive. American scientists wanted to catch up and were determined to have this kind of successful mission as well. Miss Baker was a squirrel monkey and Miss Abel was a rhesus monkey. The American space program purchased a group of monkeys and tested them to see which one could withstand hardships like confinement and electrodes. Ms. Baker and Ms. Abel stood out amongst the group and were chosen to go to space. The monkeys wore motoring equipment and were placed into small metal capsules so they were unable to move around too much. Researchers wanted to monitor their life signs and mental state during the trip to see how it could translate to human astronauts in the future. They were launched into space in a Jupiter missile from Florida on May 28, 1959. They reached an altitude of more than 300 miles above the Earth. 16 minutes later, they became the first animals the United States sent to space that came back alive. The monkeys were retrieved from the Atlantic Ocean by the Navy vessel USS Kiowa. Military personnel checked the monkeys and found no injuries or any kind of problems. Ms. Baker and Ms. Abel quickly gained worldwide fame for being the first animals from the United States to successfully go into space and come back. They were either featured on the cover of Life magazine. Just 4 days after their return to Earth, medical personnel removed the electrodes from Ms. Abel. Unfortunately, she died during the procedure. Her body is on display in her flight capsule on the Smithsonian's National Air and Space Museum. A sign telling her story was posted at the Monkey Island in Independence, Kansas, where she was born. While both monkeys made it home alive, Ms. Baker seemed to gain all the fame. She spent most of her time at the Naval Aerospace Medical Center in Florida, then at the U.S. Space and Rocket Center in Huntsville, Alabama. Ms. Baker received hundreds of letters from fans. The American Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals awarded her a Medal of Honor and a Certificate of Merit. They had supported her being sent into space because they believed it would pave the way for scientific developments in the future. She was given the best possible life for a monkey. She was even married twice. Ms. Baker died in 1984 due to kidney failure. More than 300 people attended her funeral. She was buried beside the U.S. Space and Rocket Center, next to her first husband. To this day, her fans still leave bananas at her headstone as a tribute to her service. So what do you make of these interesting historical events? Mars has been home to a variety of important discoveries in space and of course many more to come. Mars findings have opened the door to knowing just a little more about the red planet and is helping us to understand the puzzles of the past of this planet. Blueberries on Mars in 2004, NASA sent its Opportunity rover to Mars in order to explore more of its surface. hoping to learn about its composition and more information regarding the history of Mars. After landing on Mars, the rover made an interesting discovery: tiny dark blue spheres that appeared to resemble blueberries. The land covered in these spherical small pebbles were termed as blueberries by scientists, because they appeared to look incredibly similar to the fruit. There were several of these blueberries all located into one general area, which scientists found to be very curious. The blueberries were measured to be very small, only being up to 6.2 millimeters in diameter. The scientists on the Mars team were baffled because nothing like the blueberries had ever been discovered before, and it was bizarre that only this specific area contained them. Scientists were aware that the region of Mars where the blueberries were found contained a lot of hematite or iron oxide. Scientists believe that the blueberries were formed by liquid water moving through rocks over time, water heavily infused with iron oxide. This insight is extremely foundational. First of all, it suggests that flowing water was once present on Mars. For spheres of this kind, flowing water had to be involved, specifically over a long period of time. This hints to the suggestion that Mars is a highly complex terrain and that ancient Mars may have appeared much differently than the Mars we currently know. It remains a mystery how these blueberries fully formed and what was involved in their creation. While scientists are sure that iron oxide and mineral-infused water was involved, they remain unsure of just what it took for these little blueberries to form. Some theories suggest perhaps they are pieces of meteorite that have been shaped over time. Unfortunately, more sophisticated technology is required in order to fully understand what is going on behind the chemistry of the blueberries. Nothing like this exists on Earth, so scientists are extremely limited in their access to learning more about the blueberries. It is difficult to fully know what they are made of and how exactly so many of them came into being in the same area. The technology required to learn more about these blueberries is currently being designated to learning more big-picture information about Mars. However, it is possible that more may be discovered about the blueberries in the future. One thing is for sure: the discovery of the blueberries tells us that we have much more to learn about Mars. Evidence of water on Mars. The idea of water on Mars has been present in science for many years. It is now well known that Mars is considered a mostly dry planet with limited evidence of moisture. However, new information shows that ancient waters once flowed over the surface of the red planet. As we mentioned earlier, the presence of the blueberries also lends itself to the idea that running water was present on Mars. The first major hint suggesting that Mars was covered in water is through the craters formed on the face of the planet. Scientists from the Netherlands assert that the only thing capable of forming the kind of massive craters discovered would have been large amounts of water, specifically water that was deep and remained in one place for a long time. Alongside these craters are various channels formed in the surface of Mars, which suggests that running water existed and created these pathways. These channels are indented, which tells us that this running water existed for a long period of time. This confirms that once Mars was home to many lakes, rivers, and perhaps also larger bodies of water like oceans. The soil found on Mars has been found to have hydrogen in it. This has been attributed to the presence of water molecules in the soil as well. This could indicate that water may still exist beneath the surface of Mars. NASA has found rocks that look like concrete slabs built from this soil. The rock has eroded on one side. The other is completely smooth. Scientists affirm that water, specifically running water, is responsible. Another important piece of evidence that Mars contained water is the ice now present. Various rovers have discovered ice and glaciers. The temperatures on Mars now are far too low to support liquid water. There are also minerals and rocks that have formed under the ice that imply that liquid water was once part of the red planet. In 2018, a subglacial lake was discovered. It extends about 20 kilometers, and it is considered to be the first known stable body of liquid water on Mars. This provides important insight into what Mars once was, and it also allows scientists to better assess whether Mars could or ever did support life. Throughout these studies, scientists are very positive that running water once existed on Mars in high volumes. The Curiosity rover was sent to Mars to discover whether flowing water ever existed on the planet, and it seems that this has been confirmed. This shapes everything we know and continue to learn about Mars, as we discover what life may have looked like when water was running on this planet. While some scientists believe that the running water only existed for a short amount of time on Mars, it seems that the combination of studies and evidence suggests that it existed much longer than previously believed. This suggests that there may have been enough water present for a long enough period of time that Mars could have been considered habitable. The evidence of running water opens new questions about whether there was plant or animal life once on Mars and how long ago this may have been. Scientists argue that the evidence of water on Mars is the first true evidence of a possible habitable environment. Water is essential to all life as we know it, so the idea that Mars once contained this necessity for life is incredible. Olympus Mons, the largest volcano in the solar system. Earth may be unique in many ways, but one thing it shares in common with the other planets is volcanoes. Space volcanoes operate almost exactly like the ones on Earth, except that they have the potential to get bigger. Much bigger. That brings us to Olympus Mons. Olympus Mons is a massive shield volcano on the planet Mars. It is over 21 kilometers tall. To put that into perspective, it is about 2.5 times the height of Mount Everest. It's so tall that it actually goes outside of Mars' atmosphere. It is considered the tallest volcano to be discovered in the solar system. Olympus Mons covers an area roughly the size of Italy, which is a massive surface area for a volcano. Because the tectonic plates on Mars do not shift as much as they do on Earth, Olympus Mons has been able to acquire a massive size. The shifting of the tectonic plates greatly changes how things like volcanoes form because it disrupts the matter required to settle and shape the volcano. This has also allowed Olympus Mons to discharge lava to enormous heights continuously without being disturbed. So how did a volcano of this size even come to be? Scientists predict that Olympus Mons came from many lava flows pouring onto the same site over time. This allows lava to remain in the same spot for longer periods of time, which in turn allows more volcanic crust to form. Eventually, a volcano arises around these lava flows and continues to grow as more lava spews. This means that for a few billion years, there has been a steady flow of lava in one spot on Mars. This has never been able to happen on Earth, which means that no volcano like Olympus Mons has ever been able to form on Earth. Even though it has taken billions of years to form this volcano, it is actually still considered relatively young. Because of this, Olympus Mons could still be active. The last time this volcano erupted is predicted to have been anywhere from 20 to 200 million years ago, which is around the time that dinosaurs roamed on Earth. It is unlikely to erupt again, but some scientists predict that it is still a highly plausible possibility, which could have extreme effects on us. Considering the size of the volcano, there haven't been any rovers to make the journey onto this volcano. This is for many reasons, in part because it is a highly complex terrain. It is incredibly dusty, which makes gathering accurate samples extremely difficult. It also has high elevations, which makes any kind of parachute landing impossible because there is not enough room to actually make the landing. Unfortunately, this means that we will not learn much more about Olympus Mons until there is a breakthrough in technology. Our intergalactic red planet neighbor continues to be a place of exploration and research. These 3 Mars discoveries show that the Mars we know today is nothing like it once was. So what do you make of these Mars discoveries? Unidentified flying objects has been a topic of mystery and confusion. Various groups have given their opinions on these mysterious objects, with some believing that they originate from space, while others are of the idea that they're man-made and belong to top-secret governments from around the world. Due to recent announcements, this has only caused more confusion and people can't make up their mind which side they're on. Photographs emerged not too long ago of a mysterious-looking craft. It was presented at the 5th China Helicopter Exposition, and people immediately made the connection with this and a UFO. The next question on people's mind was, are Chinese officials working on real flying sources? The expo was run by the Aviation Industry Corporation of China, and the Chinese peoples this allows them to show off all the new tech they're working on. The UFO design caught people's attention because it's a topic that's still shrouded in mystery. But one of the more frustrating things about this is many people couldn't understand the sign. Online users soon translated the message though, and it reads as follows. The Super Great White Shark Armed Body Helicopter is a composite wing-body fusion high-speed helicopter configuration, designed for the future digital information battlefield. In the initial stage of its design, it refers to the international excellence of mature helicopter design technologies, such as the AH-64 Apache, the CH-53C Stallion and Russian Ka-52, and Mi-26. While absorbing their respective advantages, it adopts the internationally popular wing-body fusion blended wing-body design and the format. A new type of high-speed helicopter with conceptual designs of propeller blades has been successfully applied in helicopter design. This is a rough translation, but most of the details are in there. What this means, though, is that it's still in its early stages, and it's fair to say it's unlikely this craft is behind many of the UFOs that are witnessed. There's some that have spoke out about this object and said the following. There's no way this object is behind most of the UFO sightings reported here in the US. For one, we don't even know if this thing flies. It also looks like a giant inflatable drone. And I'm sure this isn't about to cover vast distances in a matter of seconds. Don't get me wrong, I think it looks cool and I really like the design. But for people to suggest this one prototype machine explains away all recent UFO sightings is just illusional. Another saying the following. It does sometimes make me wonder whether get the idea for these crafts. Are they designed from the unidentified flying objects that have been witnessed for hundreds of years? Another thing I find interesting is that militaries all over the world have tried to replicate these designs, and the majority of them fail. Even the US has tried to build these UFO-looking machines, and although they work to a degree, they serve no purpose other than being a novelty design. It's one of the reasons why it gets scrammed. It serves no real purpose. The Air Force Museum posted the following statement on their website. Tests with scale models at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base indicated that the cushion of air underneath the Avrocar would be unstable just a few feet off the ground. The aircraft would be incapable of reaching supersonic speeds. But the testing went ahead to determine if a suitable aircraft could be developed for the Army. The first prototype, the Avrocar, on display serial number 587055, was sent to the National Aeronautics and Space Administration Research Center at Moffett Field, California. Their wind tunnel tests proved that the aircraft had insufficient control for high-speed flight and was aerodynamically unstable. The second Avrocar prototype underwent flight tests that validated the wind tunnels tests. If it flew more than 3 feet above the ground, the Avrocar displayed uncontrollable pitch and roll motions, which the Avro engines called hubcapping. The Avrocar could only reach a maximum speed of 35 miles per hour, and all attempts to end the hubcapping failed. The project was canceled in December 1961. This is an interesting statement coming from the Air Force and NASA. Essentially, what they're saying is we can build these types of crafts, but they don't work. They are more for show and don't do anything that would be beneficial. Some have even taken this as them admitting that some of the UFOs we see in the sky are not from them. After all, we can't even replicate the shape of them. So if these crafts can only reach a max speed of 35 miles per hour, what are people encountering all around the world? The disc-shaped UFO is famous. It's one of the most cited, unidentified flying objects around, and has been reported by citizens for many decades. It's these types of statements, though, that's caused some to look outside the box when trying to explain these crimes. There's nothing wrong with admitting that we can't build them, but it does make you question them what they are. Every year, thousands of people witness UFOs from the ground. Amateur researchers have said that although it's exciting when someone witnesses or captures a UFO, the majority of them can be explained. They usually turn out to be things such as planes, weather balloons, natural phenomena, flares, or military activities. A small percentage of them, however, do remain unexplained. One interesting place where these unidentified flying objects are captured is from plane windows. These are normally much harder to explain as the photograph or video is usually clearer from this viewpoint. This has led to people recording their plane ride in the hopes of capturing something unexplained. Interestingly, It's not just passengers that have come forward with their encounters. Pilots have also detailed seeing things they can't initially explain. It was reported that 3 separate pilots were left asking questions when they encountered mysterious lights in the sky. The incident occurred on Friday, the 9th of November, 2018. This was when a British Airways pilot contacted Shannon Air Traffic Control. The first thing the pilot wanted to know was if there was any military planes or exercises in the area. The reason being because she could see objects that were moving around really fast. And it didn't look like normal activity that's seen in the area. Air traffic control said there was no exercises taking place, and that whatever was there shouldn't be. It was then reported that 2 other pilots contacted ground control saying they could see multiple objects traveling at really high speeds. Air traffic control once again reported that there was no military exercises, and that there is nothing showing on either primary or secondary radar. The pilot said the following, "Okay, but it was moving so fast. We saw a bright light and then it just disappeared at a very high speed." The pilot said they were not on a collision route with the object, but just wondered what it was. Air traffic control then reported that the 3rd pilot said they were happy they weren't the only ones who saw the objects. It was reported that the UFO was moving at incredible speeds, around Mach 2. This is 2,500 kilometers per hour and is twice the speed of sound. So if pilots are saying they can't identify these UFOs, and military officials are saying we're unable to make these types of crafts, then what have people seen? So what do you make of this recent design? And although we haven't seen it in the air yet, do you think it will face the same problems as the Avrocar? The first unmanned mission to the moon was in 1959 by the Soviet lunar program, with the first man landing being Apollo 11 in 1969. The primary objective of Apollo 11 was to complete a national goal set by President John F. Kennedy. And this was on May 25, 1961. The goal was to perform a crewed lunar landing and return to Earth. Additional flight objectives included scientific exploration by the lunar module, deployment of a television camera to transmit signals to Earth, and deployment of a solar wind composition experiment and seismic experiment package. During the exploration, the 2 astronauts were to collect samples from the moon and return them to Earth. They were also given instructions to photograph the lunar surface as much as they could. On July 20th, 1969, American astronauts Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin became the first humans ever to land on the moon. Around 6.5 hours later, Armstrong became the first person to walk on the moon. However, over the years, photographs have made the rounds on social media, and some have found interesting anomalies. NASA has said the majority of these can be explained, and these are either dust particles on the lens or just other space anomalies that happen to get picked up. Others are not so sure, and have found various anomalies that they suggest are actually UFOs. One photograph that's currently making the rounds is this one of Buzz Aldrin. It's the photograph of Buzz just before he steps on the moon. However, those that have zoomed in on this image have allegedly found an unidentified flying object in the background. And not only that, but they say this craft matches the same shape as those that are seen on our planet. Amateur researchers have said that the craft is triangular or boomerang-shaped. This is noted as being one of the most common shaped UFOs that are reported from around the world, leading some to put forward some interesting theories for why this craft was there during the moon landing. There's some that have suggested that the craft seen here is actually one of the triangular UFOs that's commonly seen on Earth. These black triangles are commonly seen in various countries, most commonly the United Kingdom, the United States, and Germany. The craft in the photograph matches the description of the triangle UFOs, which cause some to suggest that they may not belong to us. Various triangle-shaped UFOs have been seen close to the moon, which has caused some to question why they're there and why they're so interested in our moon. For over 40 years, the triangle UFOs caused much debate. It's perhaps one of the more mysterious UFOs that's reported. These crafts are often reported as being silent, and have been on a number of occasions just hovering in the sky. Sightings of the triangle UFOs often come in waves, with people seeing dozens at a time. They are also perhaps the most photographed UFO as well, with even news programs covering them. What's most interesting about these crafts is that they've been witnessed hovering motionless in the sky, and then suddenly making a high-speed departure. Pilots have said that they're faster than any conventional aircraft that's currently in the sky. Some have put forward the theory that the Triangle UFO is a top-secret government craft, while others have said it's most likely the next step in the stealth series of crafts, hence why they're able to do things that other planes can't. There's still a group of people, though, that think that these objects are unexplained. Although we mentioned that sightings come in waves, here in the UK these crafts are seen nearly every other week. Incredibly, there have been around 4,000 reports of the triangles since the 1990s in the UK alone. There have also been waves of triangle sightings in Belgium, France, Holland, and Germany. One skeptic, however, spoke out about this alleged UFO and said the following: "What I find interesting about this photograph is that these are the same people who claim we never went to the moon. And yet, here we have a photograph of an alleged UFO. It seems that these type of people can't make their minds up on whether we actually went or not. From looking at the photograph, to me it just looks like a camera anomaly, or possibly a small piece of space debris. The only thing we have to go by is this tiny object in the corner of an image. And I'm sure if we zoomed in on many of the Apollo images, we'd find similar looking objects. For me, this is completely natural." NASA also gets a lot of questions in regards to UFOs, and one of these came from a user on Twitter. They asked the following: "I know that it's true that Apollo 11 did spot a UFO. Is it true that other radios could pick up when the television broadcast was shut down during the spotting of the UFOs? If so, is it true these radios could pick up Apollo 11 saying the other spacecraft were spotted on the crater edge of the moon, and were much more advanced than Apollo 11 technology?" Dr. David Morrison, who served as an institute director at NASA, said the following to the questions: "I'm sorry to disappoint you, but you are repeating stories that are known to be false. No astronauts saw UFOs. There are no secret Apollo transmissions, radio or television picked up by hams. There was no case of Apollo astronauts spotting other spacecraft on crater rims or anywhere else." Others disagree with this and have said that over the years many different types of unidentified flying objects have been seen close to the moon, and that after investigations are carried out, many of these are forgotten about as they can't be explained. With one person saying the following: "I'm not surprised that people still fight this. After all, it's not like NASA and other space agencies are just going to come forward and admit that we've seen UFOs. Of course, they're going to say the claims are false. All one has to do is look at recent sightings and news surrounding the topic, and it's easy to come to a logical answer for what's going on." Again, though NASA have said that these objects are nothing more than camera anomalies, they've stopped speaking on the matter because whatever they say is just pushed aside by believers. Interestingly, though, astronauts themselves have spoken on the topic, with some even going public with their encounters and what they saw in space. This has only helped fuel the belief that there are mysterious objects in space, and that as of right now, our tech is nowhere near as advanced as theirs. It seems like the topic of UFOs and the interest around it is at an all-time high, with some even believing that the government will be coming forward with some credible evidence in regards to the topic. It seems that time will tell whether the government knows more than what they're letting on. So what do you make of this alleged unidentified flying object captured in this photograph of Buzz Aldrin? Do you think it's a genuine UFO, or just a camera anomaly or space junk? UFO sightings are reported all the time around the world, but many stand out more than others. Some cases have evidence that's so unique and puzzling, scientists cannot explain it. For some, alien life would in fact be the only reasonable explanation. A UFO in Brazil. Fernando Becerra and Wilson da Silva Oliveira had been fishing in São Paulo, Brazil. This was on October 1st, 1995. While they were gathering their fishing nets, they saw something in the sky. At first, they assumed it was probably a balloon since it just kept floating, but this assumption quickly changed. They realized that the object was emitting an extremely bright yellow light. It seemed to move towards them, but it was coming more quickly than a balloon would have been able to move. At that point, they knew it must have been an alien spacecraft. The pair immediately got back into their boat. Fernando hid at the bottom of the boat. Wilson said he was so frightened that he believed he would die from fear. They even tried to drive away in the boat, but the end rim stopped working as soon as the UFO flew over them. Were able to see at the bottom of it had flashing lights that were so bright they could see crabs on the other side of the river. After many efforts to start the engine, they were finally able to get away. The UFO landed on an island nearby. The two men told their families about what they saw, but they were still so frightened that they were unable to sleep that night. Even medication didn't help them stay calm enough to sleep. They kept replaying the night's events over and over in their heads. The next day, they went back to the spot where the UFO had landed to see if it was still there or if there was any signs that it had been there. They found an 18-foot wide circle in the grass where it had landed. This was along with some rectangular indentations in the dirt, presumably from the legs of the object. Some of the vegetation was burnt and it was all flattened as if something heavy had been on top. They returned home once again, and this time they reported what they saw to a Brazilian newspaper. Researchers from the National Institute of Aerospace Phenomena read the story and began an investigation of their own. They took moles of the indentations found and took other samples from the vegetation and dirt at the landing site. They also found traces of radiation. The NIAP classified it as a close encounter of the second kind. This was because of the effects it had on the boat and the ground, including the vegetation and soil. Not only did the boat's engine stop, the men found their tools and metal parts of the boat showed corrosion that wasn't there before the incident. They also suffered from eye irritation and upset stomachs. Although the soil samples showed normal pH levels, researchers tried planting seeds in the samples to see what would happen. The seeds planted in the soil samples grew quickly, while the ones planted in soil from the outside of the circle didn't grow and developed fungi. The researchers couldn't come up with an explanation for this strange occurrence. The molds of the indentation at the landing site were also added to the mystery. There weren't any known normal aircrafts with parts that matched the molds. They were completely unique. They even double-checked this information with the military, who claimed they had no aircraft in the area on that particular night. They never found any explanation for any of the evidence found at the site. The Robert Taylor case. Robert Taylor was a Livingston Development Corporation forestry worker in Scotland. On November 9, 1979, Taylor was inspecting a woods with his dog. While they were walking, his normally happy and friendly dog began whining and growling for no apparent reason. As Taylor picked the dog up, he claimed he felt a shift in the air. It felt thicker, almost as if there was electricity. Also said the bird suddenly stopped chirping. Finally, he saw an object he knew couldn't be from Earth. The object was very large and metallic. It was in the shape of a sphere about 20 feet wide, and it was hovering just above the ground. As he got closer to his object, two smaller spheres appeared out of it and began moving towards him. They had spikes coming out of them that hooked onto his trousers. This dragged him back to the main sphere. Just before losing consciousness, remembered noticing a strong burnt smell and hissing sound. 20 minutes later, Taylor woke up in the same spot with his dog nearby, but the object was gone. His clothes were torn and he had scratches and bruises all over his body. He tried to radio for help, but couldn't speak. Though he could barely walk, he managed to drag himself back to his truck, but it wouldn't start. After walking a mile to his house, his wife called the police and a doctor. At first, the police assumed he had been assaulted by another person. This theory was questioned once they visited the spot that this had happened. They carefully inspected the whole area and found two indentations, possibly from a ladder. They also found round holes that went in the same direction as the smaller spheres. The police found no other tracks to show how the object got there in the first place. Many theories have gone around about this incident. Some people believe that Taylor may have experienced a seizure caused by a mirage sent from Venus. But regardless, most people didn't believe he would make something like that up. Everyone that knew him to be an honest man. His story never changed, and he never wanted fame from his story. To this day, UFO investigators are still investigating this. They say the case won't be closed until new information comes along. The Zimbabwe Encounter. September 14, 1994. 62 children at the Republic of Zimbabwe Aerial School saw 3 metallic spheres flying in the sky above where they were playing. They saw red flashing lights and would suddenly disappear and reappear in another part of the sky. Finally, the spheres slowly flew down close to the school. One of these spheres came down and hovered far away from the school. Just above the ground, a few hundred feet away from an area filled with thorn bushes and poisonous snakes and spiders. Although they weren't supposed to go near this area, they did anyway and approached the sphere. The children then saw a creature around 3 or 4 foot tall come out of the spherical object. This creature was dressed in all black and had long black hair. Its neck, face, arms and legs were all thin, and it had large black eyes. The creature approached the children, while a similar creature stood on top of the object. Some of the younger children were terrified, as they believed the creatures were demons who ate young children, and so they ran away screaming. The creature suddenly vanished, and the one on top appeared again behind the object. Both creatures stared at the remaining children without moving. The children who were still outside said the creatures communicated with them telepathically through their eyes. One girl said that for the rest of the day she felt awful and couldn't get the images out of her mind that the creatures had put in her brain. She said they were there to warn people about destroying the planet. If they didn't stop, they would face consequences. The girl felt these consequences would mean there'd be no more air and everyone would die. These ideas were placed in her mind from the creatures, supposedly. Another child felt the creatures placed the idea in his mind that human technology was too powerful and that something bad would happen because of it. After this, they suddenly vanished again. The spherical object flew away quickly before disappearing into thin air. The whole event lasted around 15 minutes. Cynthia Hind, a UFO researcher, investigated this incident the next day. She had the students draw pictures of what they saw. 35 of them were remarkably similar. She scanned the landing spot with a counter, but didn't find any trace of radiation in the entire area. Not everyone believes that this event really occurred, however. Some people would feel there's not enough evidence to say the children were telling the truth. He believed it may have all been a prank and that the younger children may have been pressured by some of the older children in the group to say it really happened. Not realizing how far and serious authorities would take this situation, of course. Whether or not this is true, 12 children presented at the time gave it accounts that were all consistent with one another, leading researchers to at least rule out mass hysteria for sure. So what do you make of these UFO encounters? The topic of UFOs is an interesting one. There's millions of people that have claimed to have seen an unidentified flying object, and for many it's changed their view on the subject, leading them to be more open about the idea of what may be lurking outside of our solar system. There's then the other group of people that say that UFOs are not real and can be explained using everyday objects. For example, they say that what people are seeing is actually natural phenomena. Birds, planes, military crafts, camera anomalies, and so on. There's another group of people, though, that have struggled to come forward with their encounters, and this is because they take it a step further. Not only do they claim to have seen a UFO, but they say they were actually taken on board the craft by the occupants. Alien abductions have been reported for years, with each individual coming forward with similar encounters. The majority of the cases involve otherworldly-looking beings taking humans into a futuristic-looking craft, and once inside they're experimented on. Although this sounds like a frightening encounter, the majority of people actually say this is somewhat of a nice experience, and that the memories they do have of the event are usually good. Hynek scale is used to explain different types of interactions with UFOs. For example, a close encounter with the first kind is described as seeing an unidentified flying object less than 500 feet away. In this case, the individuals are able to give a detailed description of the cross they witnessed, helping investigators to build a case around the encounter. Going back a while ago, one person sent me their encounter with what they said was a genuine alien abduction. In this case, the individual had an encounter of the fifth kind. One of the issues people have with these types of encounters is backing up the event itself. This has caused many individuals to not come forward with their story, and this mostly comes down to not wanting to be ridiculed by their family, friends, and the general public. One individual sent me the following message. Dear Unexplained Mysteries, I've sent this out to a few people, but hardly anyone knows about my strange experience. I was 20 years old when this happened, and I believe that I was abducted by aliens. I've struggled to talk about this as I know the stigma that comes with the subject. I've only told one friend about this, and my family have no idea. The abduction took place in Wyoming. I was fishing on a lake in the area with one of my friends. After a few hours had passed, we noticed two bright lights in the sky. At first we thought there were stars because they started to move quickly but then stopped. They did this for around 20 minutes and we didn't think much of it. Suddenly one of the lights flew towards us and then suddenly stopped. We thought this was a meteor at the way it came down, but then it began to pulsate. These lights almost put me into a trance. After this I blacked out. It's important to note that I woke up around 3 hours later and around 1,000 meters from the lake. After traveling back and collecting my things, I called for my friend. I got an answer and they asked whether I'd put something in the drinks we had that night. I explained I was equally confused and had no idea what happened. After this, we met up, had a chat, and then went home. Both confused about the lost time and why we both blanked out. Fast forward 2 weeks and I start to have these very vivid dreams. It was like I was watching my dreams from outside my body. It's hard to explain, but it was very clear what was happening. It was like I was lucid dreaming inside a dream. During this one dream, I was floating above the lake I was fishing at, but something was off. It was the same lake that me and my friend had been fishing at the night we blacked out. And same as before, I was able to see the bright lights approach us. But this time I had a different point of view. After watching the bright lights let out a bright flash, me and my friend dropped to the ground. Only a matter of seconds after this happening, a large craft landed close to the lake. It was then that 4 beings lifted my body into the craft and then flew off. My friend was just left on the ground in a paralyzed state. After this, the dream jumped to me being inside the craft. It sounds cheesy, but the only way I can describe it is that it looked like a typical dis UFO. It was bright and sad, and there was some very slight humming noises I could hear. It was nothing like a plane engine. It was just a very quiet, slight hum. The 4 beings were tall and had large heads. I couldn't make out the faces, as in my dream state they were just blurred. Regardless, I woke up while on the craft, and 2 of the beings approached me. They were telepathically talking to me, but what was strange is that I could hear the answer that was being given to me in my dream state. It was like I was somehow connected to the event. I asked why I was there, what they wanted, and when I could go home. They were inside my mind, and I could hear them as clear as day. They said that I didn't have to worry and that this was just a routine, and that I would be taken back soon. When I asked about what they meant by routine, they just said this is something that has to happen. After this, I asked why they come here, and they responded by saying they are travelers, and that they use the cosmos to spread awareness, but they didn't elaborate. The last question I remember asking was, "What's the purpose of existence?" To which I got the following answer. The universe you reside in was part of something great, something special. Life and death doesn't exist. You will always live. You are part of something much greater. We are here to observe. There is still time. After this, I fade out of the dream and wake up, to which I then remember the next bit because I was conscious and then went on to call my friend. I have no idea what this means and can understand how the majority of people won't believe what I say. It's not about trying to convince people about what happened. I just want to get my story out there and perhaps see if anyone else has experienced anything similar or knew what happened to me. It's an interesting story, but as mentioned in the beginning, it's really tough for abductees to back up what they're saying. Even when physical proof is presented, such as a piece of clothing that happens to have high amounts of radiation on it, is still normally thrown aside. Regardless, eyewitnesses are still reporting that these types of encounters are happening around the world. So what do you make of this interesting abduction? Do you think it's a genuine encounter? Or it could be something entirely different? On the 19th of October 2017, we were visited by something that we couldn't explain. It was called Oumuamua, and when astronomers first noticed this object traveling through our solar system, something seemed off. The object in question had come from another solar system, and people quickly started to speculate what the object was. It could be seen traveling around the sun and then shooting away again. However, after this, it was not to return. Astronomers were able to record data on the object for a short period of time. It was in our solar system for over a century. The reason Oumuamua wasn't spotted until 2017 is because it wasn't close enough to reflect enough light, and astronomers weren't able to pick up on it. Even when it did get close, it was still moving very fast, and meant that astronomers had very little time to observe it. Once the strange object flew around the sun, it was going forever away, meaning it was getting fainter and fainter. The astronomers' last observations from Hubble were on the 2nd of January 2018. On the 3rd of May, it was then seen outside of Jupiter's orbit. The first theory that was put forward was that it was an asteroid. The scientists looked at the size of the object, which was 2,600 feet or 800 meters long and around 260 feet or 80 meters wide. However, in June it was reported that astronomers stated the object was not moving as it should. They picked up on the fact that Oumuamua showed a really strong non-gravitational acceleration. This told the researchers that its motion indicated that gravity was not the only thing dictating its path. Many people put forward their theories, one of which is that this object is extraterrestrial in nature. The fact that it moves like nothing researchers have seen before could indicate it's under intelligent control. Most scientists suggested that Oumuamua was likely something natural, and that its acceleration was due to a natural phenomenon. The next idea was that this mysterious object was releasing a large amount of hydrogen, and this was causing it to speed up. Interestingly, though, not everyone has agreed with this idea. Going back on the 17th of August, a new paper was published in the astrophysical journal Letters. Leo Bard and Tam Hong, who are astrophysicists at the Korea Astronomy and Space Science Institute, have said they don't think the hydrogen idea holds up and that it wouldn't work in space. This has caused some excitement, as some have gone back to the idea this could be alien tech. After all, there's many strange properties about this object that researchers can't explain. For example, the way it mimicked a comet, but yet it doesn't have a tail. Also, NASA themselves have reported that this interstellar visitor is 10 times long as it is wide, and that this aspect ratio is far greater than any asteroid or comet observed in our solar system to date. What's interesting about this is that these aren't just random people. These are respected people in their field speaking out on this topic, and disagreeing with the idea that this was something natural. Interestingly, since the Oumuamua US discovery, many people have come forward and allegedly found similar-looking objects. This is because we have access to apps that allows us to view the cosmos from the comfort of our homes. This recent Google Sky discovery had some saying that it looked very similar to Oumuamua. This recent photograph has caused some to speculate whether this and Oumuamua are the same thing, suggesting that these mysterious interstellar objects are scattered throughout our solar system. This particular one was discovered close to the Orion constellation. The person who discovered the object said they were messing around with Google Sky and zoomed in really quickly on Orion. They took a screenshot of the object as they thought it looked really interesting and then shut it down. Then they showed a few people, and it was them who made the connection between the two objects. This giant cigar-shaped object is still out for debate, and it seems with this recent paper being released, we aren't any closer to understanding what this mysterious object is. Dr. Bailey from Harvard University said the following about Oumuamua. I wouldn't say I believe it's sent by aliens, as I'm a scientist and not a believer. I rely on evidence to put forward possible physical explanations for observed phenomena. It seems, however, until we have more evidence, we can't come to a conclusion on what this mysterious space object is. Ultimately, it will be very difficult to find out more about Oumuamua, as it's no longer in the solar system. According to some, Oumuamua is expected to reach the Kuiper Belt in around 2024. In recent years, space has been the location of many mysterious discoveries. Only relatively recently in the history of humanity has mankind had the ability to travel into space. It's reported that 550 people have made the journey into space. Since Yuri Gagarin became the first human to go into space in 1961, around 2/3 of those who have made it into space have been American. The opportunity to go into space is something that many of us dream of. But for a chosen few who have made this journey, the experience was more bizarre than could be expected. Even astronauts themselves have opened up about some of the mysterious things they've encountered while in space. Though NASA continues to deny a variety of theories surrounding that of UFOs, it appears there are pieces of evidence that have confused even the best researchers. Interestingly, NASA have denied to comment on some of these matters. Some examples come straight from that of the continued live footage of the International Space Station. For those unaware, the International Space Station has a variety of cameras to monitor spacewalks and other areas that need to be under 24-hour surveillance. This has allowed the agency to play the live footage on internet shows, websites, live television broadcasting, and so on. And this is mainly to help build up an interest in space. Recently, there have been numerous events where footage of strange objects have been seen floating in the distance, and this has led many to believe that it's extraterrestrial in origin. After such incidents are spotted, the footage will later be removed or edited. The live feed will be cut or the entire incident will be ignored. This only fuels theorists to believe that something truly strange is happening above our planet, and that every day the International Space Station cameras pick up on this. After all, hundreds of these unidentified flying objects have been caught in these cameras, some of which look eerily similar to the many UFOs that are reported here on Earth. Some of the most common shaped UFOs captured on these cameras are the disc and cigar. Again, people have made the connection between these shaped crafts and the ones that are reported on Earth. It's led to some amateur researchers to constantly watch the lifelines, and this is in the hopes of capturing something strange. It's important to note, though, that NASA and other space agencies have said these objects are natural and are usually caused by space debris or malfunctions in camera equipment. So what do you make of the mysterious space object of Oumuamua? Do you think it's natural, or do you believe that it's under intelligent control? In life, we all want answers. Yet in life, there are so many questions, or should we say mysteries, that remain unanswered. Some have no logical or scientific explanation to them, and they affect people and objects in the strangest ways. The ghost and the baby. Everyone knows baby monitors are great for checking on our little ones whilst you're in a different room. However, as per the Hollywood horror movies, there are certain images and sounds you don't want to come through your baby monitor. While spirits and ghosts may only be things of fiction to some, one American couple claimed they've been driven from their home by evil occurrences, and the devilish incident that happened in their house didn't affect them but their innocent 1-year-old baby. Heather Bruff, 25, had awoken her baby daughter Lily from a nap one day and brought the baby downstairs to sit with the family. But when Heather sat down with her baby in the living room, she noticed something strange. 3 scratches had appeared on Lily's face and were a deep shade of purple. Heather and her partner Josh naturally found this a bit strange, so they decided to check out the baby monitor in Lily's room to see if she'd scratched herself whilst asleep. But things quickly became a little more sinister. The couple noticed a figure in the room with Lily around the time that she was apparently scratched. However, it didn't seem like an intruder or a human one anyway. The figure seemed faint, much like a sort of spirit or ghost, and for the family it only worsened a suspicion of paranormal activity in their Michigan home. Heather claimed she'd been experiencing strange goings-on for a period of time since they moved into the property. She'd apparently wake up feeling like somebody was strangling her and would hear groaning and shouting noises from a male voice in the middle of the night. Josh expressed his fear that the house may actually be haunted, and soon after the couple began to look into their property's past. It transpired that the house had a dark past, and according to the couple, its former owner was a bedridden old lady who had broken her hip and fallen down the stairs. For some years later, her schizophrenic brother had lived there too, which the family occupied adjacent to the old farmhouse the woman had died in. The couple have had the house investigated by paranormal investigators who confirmed a presence existed in the building. They no longer leave Lily upstairs in any room by herself and are determined to get to the bottom of the eerie happenings in their home. Recently, the family announced their intentions to move. Zach Baggins and the Conjuring House. Ghost hunter, TV presenter, and all-round creep-loving guy, Zach Baggins has been surrounded by ghouls and ghosts for most of his professional life. The host of the show Ghost Adventures, Baggins also owns his own haunted museum in Nevada. Despite becoming accustomed to the spooks of the underworld, Baggins reportedly isn't immune to the effects that his area of interest has on people. Dubbed the Modern Ed and Lorraine Warren, Baggins paid a visit to the legendary Harrisville farmhouse in Rhode Island, which is the real-life setting for the Conjuring film franchise. The original owners of the home, depicted in the films, spoke of how the Warrens knew that they had their hands full when they entered the farmhouse to investigate alleged incidents of possession and poltergeist activity. When Baggins entered the farmhouse to explore it himself, things began to go wrong. Baggins allegedly began to complain of chest pains and dizziness, as well as difficulty breathing. Baggins declared himself unwell and described how he just didn't want to be around anybody. He insisted that he didn't feel possessed and how he would know what that felt like. He described his feeling as if something was drawing life out of him into some sort of entity or atmosphere. Baggins, the Warrens, and others have all felt a strange and eerie presence in the Harrisville farmhouse, and it could well be one of the most haunted places in America. Amethyst Realm and the Ghost Marriage. Nobody wants to be ghosted, whether that's by a guy or a girl. However, for one woman, ghosts are all that's on her mind. As creepy and weird as that may sound, a woman called Amethyst Realm reveals the utterly bizarre headline of the woman who had sex with 20 ghosts is now engaged to a spirit. Amethyst Realm appeared on British daytime television in 2018, claiming that she'd engaged in intercourse around 20 different ghosts and then became engaged to a poltergeist. She explained that the ghost had proposed on an anniversary visit to the Wookiee Hole Caves, and whilst the apparition couldn't get down on one knee, she did apparently hear it speak. Realm described the voice as deep, sexy, and real, which is probably the weirdest thing we've heard for quite a while. A spiritual counselor, Realm met her ghostly lover on a business trip to Australia. She explained that she wasn't looking for a relationship, but was clearly thrown head over heels by her spiritual partner. As she was walking through Australia, she spoke of how she felt an incredible energy and instantly knew that she had found her dream partner. Now apparently spirits are meant to stay in one place, and when Realm boarded her flight home, she was distraught as she thought her whirlwind romance was ending there and then. However, as she fastened her seatbelt, that same energy overcame her again. Realm was spellbound with love when she realized that her spirit had joined her on the flight home to the UK. Both her family and friends are reportedly happy for her. She has even said that having a ghost guy is way better than a real-life boyfriend. The couple plan to have a pagan wedding ceremony, and Realm thinks that it will be quite a big do. Realm has gone on to explain that she isn't too sure that her lover is actually male. However, she doesn't believe this is important with spirit relationships, as they don't use names to communicate. In an interview, Realm said that a medium told her recently that she and her lover had been together in 3 past lives. She'd asked them about that, but they say it's not important. She also added that ghost lovers tend to be more sensual and adept than the average male. The main difference is she just can't see them. Realm even claims that her ex-ghost lovers would draw hearts in the condensation on windows near to her. In fact, during Amethyst Realm's first spirit relationship, she technically cheated on her actual boyfriend. According to Realm, her boyfriend returned home to hear her having ghost sex and understandably thought there was another guy with his girlfriend. When he reached the bedroom, Realm was sitting there wearing only lingerie, but there was nobody to be seen. He thought that Realm's mystery lover may have been hiding, but in fact they just weren't visible. However bizarre you may find Realm, she seems to have found happiness with her ghost partner. Realm also explained that the couple are planning on having a ghost baby. Whether you believe in ghosts, phantoms, spirits, and poltergeists or not, one thing is for sure, the paranormal world can be scary, frustrating, mysterious, and downright weird. While some genuinely believe that we can contact the dead, and that they can cause such chilling, unexplained phenomena, others think it's all a big hoax. Either way, these spirits and demons make some good movies and also churn out some of the strangest tabloid news that we've ever seen. In most cases, though, we're glad that we're not the ones involved. But what do you make of these ghost mysteries? Man has always been fascinated by space. In recent years, we've made it our goal to explore various planets in our solar system. We've also sent people into space to live on the International Space Station. The International Space Station is a large spacecraft that can be found in orbit around our planet. Over the years, astronauts have called this place home. It serves as a science laboratory where various experiments have been carried out. The station was the work of various countries. Many nations have sent their astronauts to stay on board, and incredibly many parts of it were assembled in space by the astronauts themselves. It's not as deep in space as some might think, though. It orbits around our planet at an altitude of approximately 250 miles. Due to it traveling over 17,500 miles per hour, it orbits Earth every 90 minutes or so. In recent years, it's become important for space agencies to establish space stations in space. This helps with continuing research projects and plans. Recently, however, NASA officials have come forward and said there's a mystery leak on the space station, and that's they can't identify where the leak is. They did state that the air is leaking out slowly, and tried to downplay the whole situation as being nothing of concern. Others, however, have said it sounds bigger than what they're letting on, and that it seems strange that they're unable to find the leak. This has meant that the NASA crew has spent the majority of their time in the Russian part of the space station. Ivan Vanner, a Russian cosmonaut who's currently staying on the International Space Station, said the following in a tweet: "Staying in space isolation at the International Space Station for 4.5 months already. We isolated for 3 days in 2 modules of the station's Russian segment because of a small leak. No need to worry." Interestingly, NASA said that small leaks are actually quite common, and they even said in a recent press release that they're looking into the issues, saying that it was first detected back in September of 2019. By moving the NASA astronauts to another section, they hope the source of the leak can be found more quickly. Regardless, it's still a worrying concept to be flying around the Earth in a space station that's leaking. So what do you make of this news? Technology has never been as advanced as it is today. With new and exciting developments in technology each year, there's always something to discuss. These improvements in the tech space come with many positives as well as some potential negative effects. Artificial intelligence, also known as AI, is often followed by controversy and questions as they are still somewhat unfamiliar to many. Facebook artificial intelligence robots create own language. It's no secret that all of the big players in the science and technology world have been experimenting and continuously learning about AI. The research is never ending as they strive to put forth AI that will impact the world in a way we've never seen before. Using technology to make life easier is to our advantage. Whilst AI can provide significant improvements in our lives, it may come at a cost. Facebook was in the midpoint of researching AI chatbots when they made a shocking discovery. Although the bots were given specific scripts to communicate through, they seemingly began communicating with one another in their own language. Humans were unable to understand the communication between the chatbots or grasp how it was developed with no human input. This information is shocking yet impressive as it speaks to where we stand with artificial intelligence and what it is capable of. With interesting conversations about digital assistant platforms such as Siri and Alexa already at hand, this makes things even more interesting. Whilst those platforms are capable of listening to conversations and understanding your purchasing behaviors, it is nothing in comparison to the intelligence among these AI chatbots. It's not simply the general public who fear AI and what it could lead to in the future. Experts have cautioned the use of AI for years and have predicted its eventual elimination of the human race. How would that be possible? Quite frankly, the robots could supersede our biological evolution and see us as a threat or as an inefficient use of resources. With the ability to produce everything at a much faster rate, it's not a reach to say that AI could possibly take over when the time is right. This discovery has instilled fear in many who see the potential of AI but also predict a dangerous outcome for humankind. From a logical standpoint, it's easy to see how robots would deem humans as unimportant in the grand scheme of things. That can be a terrifying thought, but we have not yet reached a level of advancement in AI that poses an immediate threat. Do you think artificial intelligence will take over in this lifetime? Elon Musk's Neuralink. If you thought the AI chatbots creating their own language was crazy, this next AI development is beyond mind-blowing. Elon Musk has recently created a startup known as Neuralink. The concept involves linking human brains to computers with newfound success in animal testing. The primary goal of Neuralink is to aid in brain and spinal cord injuries that leave people without the ability to move or walk. With its possible aid, it will change the course of history and scientific discovery. Neuralink involves digging deep into the human mind. They intend on drilling small holes into the brain and inserting super slender electrodes called threads, steering clear of blood vessels as they go. We have never seen this type of technology used on humans before, but it could be a game changer. Neuralink explains how the electrodes that are to be placed in the brain not simply just read the neurons to understand what's happening in the brain, but will also write signals to the brain. This type of technology will have the capabilities to restore vision or touch. Within the current tests, placing these electrodes don't appear to be very dangerous. There is only a 1 in 100 chance of them causing a brain bleed, and with future improvements, the odds could weigh even more in our favor. Although the initial goal has been focused on helping those who have sustained serious injuries, Neuralink is looking into the future. With a long-term goal of building a digital superintelligence layer that will ultimately link humans and artificial intelligence, there are many skeptics. If this technological advancement continues on the path it's currently on, we will face many challenges. Will it be safe? Will this technology be desired? Neuralink's competitors worry that the brain-machine interface technology is too invasive and suggest opting for non-invasive techniques that have the ability to stimulate the brain. With the possibility of this technology being tested on humans in the future, it's understandable that many have concerns. Even if humans start utilizing it, it will be a long time before we see dramatic results, such as having the ability to simultaneously download a language, for example. With many FDA regulations in place, it will take a while to even make the transition from animal to human testing. Things will start off slow, and who knows how far Neuralink will take this new technology. Would you risk a brain bleed to test out Elon Musk's Neuralink? It sure will be fascinating to see how human clinical trials and testing go in the future. AI robots are starting to look more human-like. When it comes to AI, your mind may first jump to robots. Robots have been prevalent through displays in the media, with many movies and TV shows touching on their potential impact on the world. Since AI has developed, we're constantly seeing advancements in the way that robots appear human. They are beginning to look more like us and taking on our unique attributes that make us human. One recent and intriguing example is Sophia the robot, who was turned on in 2016. Sophia was created by a former Disney Imagineer, David Hansen. She was designed to look like a cross between Audrey Hepburn and Hansen's wife and was given the name Sophia as it means wisdom. Unlike most other robots you'd lay your eyes on, she looks surprisingly close to a real human with brown eyes and facial features to match. Whilst her image is shockingly close to that of a human, there's much more to her. She is the first robot ever to become a citizen of a country, Saudi Arabia. Sophia has spoken at many conferences, committees, and most impressively, the United Nations. She maintains many differentiating features in comparison to other robots, making her a humanoid. While she may not have feelings in the way that humans do, she is able to express and understand them. She also has a surprising sense of humor you wouldn't expect from a robot. She is able to comprehend and read situations where humor could aid the conversation. With such realistic features, those who have held conversations with Sophia sometimes momentarily forget they're speaking with a robot. Her ability to gesture movements and change facial expressions are part of what makes her seem so human-like. She wasn't always this way, though. It took time for her to understand facial and conversational cues when speaking to a human. After a few days, she learned, just like a human would, however at a much faster rate. Sophia the robot makes the thought of inviting artificial intelligence and robots into our lives much more appealing. She was designed with specific human values in mind, such as wisdom, compassion, and doesn't show signs of rage or anger. What does this mean for the future of robots? All we know is that they are being built to look more and more like humans. Who knows whether or not we will someday confuse them for one of us? Do you find AI frightening, or does it excite you to think of what the future could hold for AI? After exploring the ever-changing world of AI, we can't help but wonder what changes are in store in the next decade. We may think that AI is a world away from having a significant impact on our lives, but who's to say things won't be drastically different in the next few years? With much uncertainty and questions that have yet to be answered, it's difficult to predict what will happen in the future. Will humankind and AI work together, or will technology take over? We'll only come to discover those answers as time goes on. But what do you make of these artificial intelligence developments? The universe holds many fascinating and sometimes scary secrets, with many of them largely unknown. What we as humans don't really know much about is black holes. These all-consuming voids that eliminate light throughout the universe are enigmas. Whilst we do understand much more than we did 20 or 30 years ago, black holes are still baffling scientists to this day. A truly terrifying feat of nature, black holes are becoming more and more understandable, and we're discovering more consistently. TUN 618 black hole. Located around 10 billion light-years away from us here on Earth lies TUN 618 quasar, and at the center of that is possibly one of the most massive supermassive black holes in existence. First noted during a survey of stars that ended up being mainly white dwarfs in 1957, the TUN 618 quasar wasn't officially recognized until 1963, when quasars themselves were first recognized as an occurrence of the universe. It was then in 1970 during a radio survey in Italy that there was in fact a radio emission detected from the TUN 618 quasar. Known as very luminous, TUN 618 quasar was identified as very distant because of its redshift but still visible, therefore being known as very luminous because this could still be observed from Earth despite it being 10 billion light-years away. The TUN 618 quasar is very luminous, and the black hole swirling at its center is estimated to be an astronomical 66 billion times more massive than that of our own Sun. It's no surprise that because of this, the TUN 618 supermassive black hole is one of, if not the most massive black hole that we currently know of. What's mostly impressive about the TUN 618 supermassive black hole is its mass. It's truly incomprehensible by us here on Earth, because of how we would be comparing it to our own Sun. To us, our Sun is gigantic and massive, its true size completely dwarfing Earth. So to then try and picture something 66 billion times the Sun's mass is borderline impossible. Home 15A black hole. Whilst it may not be the most massive of black holes, the Home 15A black hole has a very interesting backstory and is by no means a small black hole. It's essentially the second most massive black hole in the entire universe. Whilst observing the Abell 85 cluster, the Max Planck Institute discovered something truly incredible. The Abell 85 cluster is a collection of around 500 galaxies. But what we're interested in is what lies at the very center of this cluster of galaxies, the Home 15A galaxy. Early calculations from scientists indicated that the center of the Home 15A was much more dimmer than it perhaps should have been when taking into account the astronomical mass of the stars that are located within the galaxy. All of this indicated that there was something different about Home 15A's center. Well, it turned out to be a black hole. But not just any black hole. After attempting to measure the mass of said black hole, the scientists discovered the estimates were much larger than first thought, and in fact, this black hole, now dubbed an ultramassive black hole, has a mass of around 40 billion times that of our Sun. That is a staggering number, and there's no real way to comprehend something of that scale. However, it is fascinating nonetheless. You might be wondering how something as massive as this ultramassive black hole could even exist within a galaxy given the size of our own. Well, Home 15A is a giant galaxy known as an elliptical galaxy. An elliptical galaxy is formed when a spiral galaxy such as our own, the Milky Way, merges within another spiral galaxy. It goes further though, as this newly formed elliptical galaxy can then merge with another elliptical galaxy, creating an even bigger galaxy. When these galaxies merge together, the black holes in their centers can also merge and, exactly like the galaxies themselves, create an even larger black hole. When these black holes collide and get larger, it can push stars away, forming the darker center. This is how scientists discovered the Home 15A black hole. Whilst the Home 15A black hole is the most massive in the nearby universe, being only 700 million light-years away from us, the previous entry on this list actually trumps the Home 15A optimative black hole. The TUN 618 quasar ultramassive black hole is more massive but is located 10 billion light-years away, so cannot be considered to reside in the nearby universe. IC 1101 black hole, located around 1 billion light-years away from us here on Earth, is the Abell 2029 galaxy cluster. Within this cluster is the IC 1101 supergiant elliptical galaxy. As mentioned earlier, an elliptical galaxy is the product of two spiral galaxies merging together. The IC 1101 itself is actually one of the biggest galaxies in the known universe, which is a very impressive feat in itself. Not only that, the IC 1101 is home to something even more interesting. An ultramassive black hole, the third largest in the observable universe to be more specific, lies in the center of IC 1101. The black hole itself has not had its mass directly measured. However, it's estimated to be just under the mass of Home 15A ultramassive black hole, around 40 billion times the mass of our own Sun. Whilst this is IC 1101's estimated mass, it could actually be between 40 to 100 billion times the mass of our own Sun. But as mentioned previously, IC 1101 hasn't been directly measured at the time of recording, so this could potentially be the most massive once measured more accurately. The IC 1101 galaxy is one of the more interesting galaxies that we know of, home to an estimated 100 to 150 trillion stars. That's again completely crazy to think of in practical terms. The supergiant elliptical galaxy of IC 1101 has a huge radius of 3 million light-years. The total mass of IC 1101 is 1.125 quadrillion solar masses. The IC 1101 black hole located at the center has a mass of 70 billion solar masses. What's more mind-blowing is that because of its distance away from us here on Earth, anything we observe is more likely over 1 billion years old. It's because of this we really have no idea what's going on at the IC 1101 at present. An interesting point to think about is that due to the sheer amount of stars that are located within the IC 1101, there would more than likely be hundreds, if not thousands, of potential civilizations inhabiting this galaxy. Given the fact that the black holes we've spoken about today are so massive and incomprehensible to us, means that probability would suggest somewhere out there is more life or other civilizations. On the Kardashev scale, a scale used to determine the strength or size of a civilization, if the civilization were to occupy and control the IC 1101 galaxy, then that would fall into the highest category of the scale, a scale 3. This simply states that the civilization has completely colonized the galaxy. This is compared to us on Earth. We as a civilization would fall into the lowest end of the scale, a scale 1. A 1 on the scale is simply planetary scale occupation or control. So we as the human race control the planet. Going into specific detail and discussing these truly incredible occurrences throughout the universe can almost be quite an unsettling experience. Learning about these absolutely astronomical black holes, or should we say ultra-massive black holes, is fascinating more than any other. It shows just how more advanced we are getting as we progress as a civilization, and the simple fact that we can comprehend these mammoth black holes is fascinating in itself. The black holes we discussed today, TUN 618, Home 15A, and IC 1101 are universe royalty. They are, at the time of recording, the biggest black holes in the known universe. But what do you make of these black holes? When Europeans first arrived in the island of Rapa Nui, known more commonly as the Easter Islands back in 1722, they were surprised to find a small tribal population of only around 2,000 to 3,000 responsible for impossible-to-explain megalithic statues. When questioning the native population, they seemed just as confused and unknowing of the construction processes surrounding the Easter Island hence. This has led to some interesting discoveries being made over the years. One interesting idea that's been put forward is the Easter Island water sources. In an attempt to better understand the random positioning of the several hundred Easter Island heads located around the island, archaeologists and researchers have been trying to build up an almost psychological profile of the placement of the megalithic statues. And this is by gathering information on the environmental surrounding of the statues and what their placement could be referencing when compared to other structures or landscapes surrounding the heads. Originally, researchers believed the heads could have been placed in key areas to be used as markers for crop-growing regions and areas for small gardens. Evidence for this theory was found when archaeologists uncovered the remains of organized crops in the ground surrounding the Easter Island heads. This theory would later be built upon by other anthropologists who believed that the heads were markers for food sources, as the Easter Island heads found near the coast could have been markers for prime fishing locations where fish would have spawned. This theory was quickly dismissed, however, when a substantial amount of heads were found not to be surrounded by any discovered remains of food sources, with some heads even residing in regions that weren't able to grow crops or food. This would leave the placement of the heads a mystery for decades, until recently when researchers would discover the true reasoning for their placements. When archaeologists watch animals drinking water from the ocean, they would have a hard time understanding why none of the creatures would get sick from drinking the high amount of salt from the water. However, when testing the water, they found that unknown freshwater sources were pouring from the island in key regions, allowing the water to be safe to drink by native life. Interestingly, every region in which these freshwater streams exited the island, there was an Easter Island head nearby to mark the location. Running off of the theory that the Easter Island heads could be marking locations for freshwater drinking sources, the team began looking for freshwater sources near every Easter Island head, and found that all of the heads, a little more than 1,000 statues across the island, all match locations for freshwater sources. This discovery also helped to explain why organized crops existed closer to the statues than elsewhere, as the ancient civilization most likely used freshwater sources to water their crops several hundred years in the past. Although there's still many researchers that put this theory into question, the freshwater source theory has become an accepted theory, surrounding the reasoning for the seemingly random placement of the Easter Island heads. Another thing that people may not be aware of is that the Easter Island heads have bodies. The statues found all across the Rapa Nui Island are commonly known as the Easter Island heads all across the world, given that the megalithic statues appear to only be depictions of giant heads in the ground. Interestingly, however, it appears that the megalithic stone statues are more accurately massive carved monoliths with bodies, and these are 3 times longer than the length of the head alone, with the tallest of the monoliths being uncovered back in 2017 and stood at an unbelievable 33 feet in height, close to the size of a 3-story building. When archaeologists began digging up the historically protected site to better understand the construction processes surrounding the megalithic statues, the research team quickly began to notice that the bodies were far larger and far more detailed than they previously imagined. The bodies of the stone structures seemed to possess elongated carved arms at their sides, waist that showed primitive clothing that were most likely worn by the ancient Rapa Nui people. And the entire stone monolith is estimated to have been so tall that the structure must have rested on the surface at one point, but was buried over time due to the natural landslides and erosion on the island, helping the researchers to better calculate the timeline surrounding the creation of the statues. Even more exciting for the researchers, The bodies of the Easter Island heads seem to have featured detailed carvings all across the statues that leave a record of moon and star symbols, a strange hieroglyphic language and references to Polynesian canoes, most likely telling the original myth of the native Rapa Nui having come from the Polynesian islands, centuries before the collapse of the ancient civilization. It's believed that each Easter Island statue holds different stories on the bodies of the statues. However, it's impossible to uncover and dig up every statue as the island is protected by historical significance, and damage to the site can be done by digging up each of the monoliths across the island. As research continues to be made surrounding the statues, different clothing styles, mythologies, and stories have begun to surface once again. So what caused the collapse of the Easter Island? Research archaeologists and anthropologists studying the artifacts left behind by the Easter Island civilization have been struggling to find an explanation as to what appeared to have caused the complete collapse of the Easter Island civilization. They've said that it's estimated at being more than 800 years old, dating as far back in their origins after departing the Polynesian islands during 1200 AD. Unfortunately, there appears to be no working theory accepted by the archaeological community surrounding the native inhabitants of the island and the collapse of their society that was estimated as having more than 3,000 people living on the island during the height of its power. Researchers have theorized that inbreeding could have caused rising birth defects that led to genetic illnesses and the eventual collapse of the Easter Island. However, this theory is often dismissed by the archaeological community, given the fact that the native population was considered healthy and strong. Another working theory was that a breed of Polynesian rats that were aboard the ships of the Rapa Nui when they reached Easter Island led to the eventual collapse of the island's ecosystem. However, this theory is also put into question, as there's no evidence that the rats having caused the ecosystem to collapse and that the modern-day Polynesian rats were most likely stowaways on European ships. Most surprisingly, researchers have discovered that at one point in time palm trees as tall as 50 feet were growing all across the island, being the tallest species of palm tree in the entire wild. The current working theory as to the collapse of power surrounding the Rapa Nui Islands believes that overpopulation on the island led to overuse of its scarce resources and the complete eradication of the native tree life. Archaeologists also believe the evidence points to the Rapa Nui eating each other, and this is due to overpopulation and ecosystem collapse, but no known evidence has been found to support the overpopulation collapse theory. Interestingly, anthropologists studying the Polynesian Islands, the closest inhabited lands to the isolated Easter Islands, discovered impossible to explain similarities between the origin story surrounding the people of the Easter Island and the strange exo-stories known across the Polynesian Islands. According to the researchers, in ancient Polynesian myths, it was believed that the Polynesian king had 7 children of whom were born with magical powers, Polynesians as giants. Fearing their great power and their short tempers, the Polynesian king quickly sent his sons away to be banished, and cast them onto an island far away for them to live in exile, and this was in the direction of the Easter Island. Oddly enough, it appears that this myth can be confirmed when analyzing the large stone structures on the island. The majority of the large stone structures known as the Easter Island heads, with researchers believing that the placement was made to offer a sort of overwatching protection for the island dwellers. However, there appears to be 7 large Easter Island heads that face in the direction of the Polynesian Islands, unlike the nearly 1,000 other Easter Island heads that face inwards, almost as if to reference the origin of the 7 sons. It's interesting to note that though the Easter Island myths do not seem to reference the origin of the Polynesian Islands, the Easter Island mythology does talk at length about giants and the creation of the Easter Island heads by giants. Given the megalithic structures of the heads, even in the modern day it's been impossible to replicate the structures in such a limited location. This has caused some to speculate that it could very well be that these 7 sons, of whom were born giants, created these megalithic structures eons ago. So what do you think of these interesting and new discoveries surrounding the forgotten culture of the Easter Island civilization and the megalithic structures all across the island? April 14, 1912, and the allegedly unsinkable RMS Titanic powers through freezing Atlantic waters on her maiden voyage. Heading to New York, Titanic is carrying over 3,000 people. The dark night is only illuminated by a scattering of stars, and in the lookout's nest, Frederick Fleet sits staring into the black abyss. Suddenly, Fleet spots something ahead of the ship. As Titanic advances, the object becomes clearer. Suddenly, a shout reaches the bridge. Iceberg right ahead. First Officer William Murdoch hastily orders the crew to steer Titanic around the gigantic icy threat in front of them. However, it's too little too late, and at around 11:40 p.m., Titanic strikes the iceberg, which rips a large hole in her side. Titanic sits sinking as women and children board lifeboats. The infamous song of the ship's band rings out above the pan, like a devilish symphony accompanying passengers into the dangerous ocean below. At 2:10 a.m., Captain Edward Smith takes a final tour of the deck, relieving staff of their duties and telling them that it's now every man for themselves. 10 minutes later, Titanic snaps in half and sinks to the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean, taking 1,500 people with her. She remains there to this day. At the rare and valuable artifacts on board, divers have not been able to recover all the famous items from the ship. The 5 Steinway grand pianos. As the 20th century broke in and began to boom, many lives on both sides of the Atlantic Ocean were filled with luxury. The progressive era and defiance of prohibition allowed mass worth creation in America. And in the UK, the Edwardian period saw much the same occur. Pianos were lavish instruments that made fine centerpieces for drawing rooms and other places in the luxury home. Steinway and Sons manufactured some of the best pianos in the world, and the building of 5 Steinway pianos was commissioned to sail with the Titanic. They were custom designed for the ship's first and second classes and would play over lavish dinners in Titanic's classy dining rooms. They were all designed to become art cases once the ship returned to London. Designed to impress guests, the Titanic's size wasn't the only feature of the ship that guests marveled at. An array of neoclassical architecture made her feel more like a stately home than a ship, and the 5 Steinway pianos added to the passengers' immersion in a world of luxury. Built in Hamburg, the pianos had to fit Titanic's visual ambience, and Harland & Wolff, Titanic's manufacturers, insisted that 3 were made in accordance with the first-class design specification and a further 2 for second class. However, when the ship went down on that fateful night in April 1912, the Steinways, which had been bolted to the floor, also disappeared under the icy black surface of the North Atlantic Ocean. Hundreds of thousands of pounds worth of piano are now thought to sit 13,000 feet below the surface of the Atlantic within the Titanic's wreck. However, amongst the wreckage, divers managed to spot something. It looked like a piano in very good condition and still bolted to the floor. Yet, with 16 pianos on board Titanic, was the photographed one a Steinway piano? Even after more photos were taken and more research was done, recovery teams could not come to any certain conclusion. The piano could have been one of the 5 Steinways, and perhaps even one of the famous Model B pianos. Considering the piano in the wreck was still bolted to the floor, we can be certain that the piano was one of supreme quality, and therefore could well be a Steinway piano. However, the piano remains unraised and serves only as a corroding reminder of the luxury standards for the time on board the fateful Titanic. The lost jewelry Titanic herself was not the only luxurious thing about her maiden voyage to New York. With 324 first-class passengers on board, the first-class lounges, cabins, and dining rooms on the ship were awash with lavish, high-quality objects. The number of rich people on board meant a high volume of expensive items, such as jewelry, from 18-karat gold rings, diamond and emerald-encrusted cufflinks, and stunts and other luxury items. The Titanic's most prestigious passengers enjoyed a rich life both on and off the ship. However, when Titanic went down, a lot of expensive jewelry went down with her. While some of this has been recovered in the various expeditions to the Titanic's wreck, a lot of it still lies hidden amongst the rusting hull and the corroding cabins. If you have seen the Oscar-winning 1997 film, featuring Leonardo DiCaprio and Kate Winslet, you may recall the famous diamond salvage scene that opens Titanic. In 2018, a team of divers began a salvage operation to recover the alleged $200 million worth of diamonds that still sit at the bottom of the ocean. However, Titanic isn't going to last forever. She is constantly rusting and being eroded by the Atlantic Ocean and is slowly disintegrating. Experts are unable to put an exact date on this, but it's thought that Titanic has about 30 years left. However, the plans to recover the diamonds have drawn some opposition from survivors of the Titanic sinking. Milvina Dean, who was only 9 weeks old at the time of the disaster, believes it's wrong to disturb the wreck. In an interview, she said that any bits and pieces that have come out from the ship on the seabed is all right. However, to go to the ship, no, that is all wrong. However, the company that owns the salvage rights to Titanic believes it's important that these artifacts aren't left to simply rot at the bottom of the sea. Despite claims against the company such as grave robbing, the company's CEO maintains that anything recovered will be used for display and not sold. After all, leaving $200 million worth of diamonds at the bottom of the ocean seems too valuable to simply abandon. Joseph Conrad's manuscript. Polish-British writer Joseph Conrad is widely considered one of the English language's greatest novelists. Yet he didn't even speak English fluently. One of Conrad's greatest stories was Lord Jim, in which Conrad anticipates the fate of J. Bruce Ismay, the managing director of White Star Line at the time of the Titanic sinking. Ismay was heavily criticized for abandoning the ship with the women and children rather than going down with the Titanic, like many of the ship's crew did. Strangely, something that did go down with Titanic would make Ismay's story a little more interesting. Lord Jim, a young British seaman, abandons a sinking ship that has hit an object in the water late one night. However, Jim abandons the ship with the captain and 2 crewmen before all passengers have been lowered into lifeboats. The story follows Jim coming to terms with his guilt and accepting what he has done. Like Jim, Ismay came under extensive criticism even to this day from the public and press alike. Many believed that Ismay should have gone down with the Titanic and that his actions were cowardly. He gained the nicknames J. Bruce Ismay and the Coward of the Titanic due to the fact that as a senior White Star Line official, he had abandoned the ship whilst women and children were still on board. Titanic's mail hold was carrying the manuscript of another of Conrad's work, a precursor to Lord Jim called Karain a Memory. A former mariner, Conrad knew full well the way in which seamen worked and the stresses and tolls they were placed under. Sea could and can be a lonely and dangerous place, and Conrad was able to identify and understand the psyches of sailors. In Lord Jim, he unintentionally but arguably accurately depicted how Ismay never quite moved on from the Titanic disaster and his actions on that fateful night. J. Bruce Ismay became a man of solitary habits in his later years, and whilst he remained an active but reclusive member of White Star Line's board, he was fraught with regret about his past. Allegedly the year before Ismay's death, his grandson asked him if he'd ever been shipwrecked. Ismay replied, "Yes, I was once in a ship which was believed to be unsinkable." RMS Titanic was an incredible engineering feat for her time, yet naivety in design led to her builders and owners wrongly believing she was unsinkable. With this belief came a lack of lifeboats and a tragic loss of life. Though those on board may have been separated by class, the sub-zero Atlantic Ocean did not discriminate. Men, women, and children who couldn't reach the lifeboats all perished together when Titanic fell beneath the surface on that fateful April night in 1912. Although she remains a rusting grave at the bottom of the ocean, Titanic serves as a reminder to both the greatness of and the tragic flaws that led to the demise of so many. Luckily, the lessons learned by ship manufacturers from the disaster means that a tragedy like Titanic will hopefully never happen. But what do you make of these 3 missing items from the Titanic? Space is referred to as the last unexplored frontier. Scientists and researchers have said although we've done well to understand some of what the universe has to offer, there's still many impossible to understand secrets that seems to hold just outside of our grasp. Every now and then it seems that astrophysics uncovers something strange about our solar system, and this gives us a glimpse into the vast unknown of our universe. A great way to pass time is by looking up towards the night sky and looking at the wonders the Milky Way galaxy has to offer. Our ancient ancestors have been doing this for thousands of years, and it's allowed us to see some incredible sights. From constellations, calendars, and mapping, the observations of the heavens had been useful for navigation, for understanding our place in the universe, and even for important markers of time and the passing of seasons. Not only does observing the cosmos make you realize how small we are, but it's also important for science. Space agencies like NASA are able to scan the night sky and understand what's going on around our planet. This is good for things like near-Earth objects. Near-Earth objects are small celestial bodies such as asteroids that could cause harm to the planet. It's important for scientists to log these asteroids and study them, as they will most likely have many close encounters with Earth during their lifetime. The majority of these asteroids will pass by us and have no effect on our planet. However, some do pose a threat. Although we think of them as just space rocks that float around in space, these giant celestial bodies have the power to cause massive amounts of damage to Earth. NASA have currently said they're tracking an asteroid that will make contact with our planet on the 6th of September. Researchers have said that this asteroid is classified as a near-Earth object, and that it's currently traveling at over 31,400 miles per hour. If an asteroid comes within 1.3 astronomical units from the Sun, it's given the name of a near-Earth object. It's added to the logs to ensure that it can be watched by teams of scientists from around the world. Sometimes these asteroids can go off their paths, which in turn will send them on a neutral trajectory. This asteroid is called 465,824 or 2010 FR, with the researchers saying that it measures in at just over 180 meters in length and 260 meters wide. Interestingly, the celestial body is said to come into contact with Earth's orbit within the next week. Due to its size, it's been labeled as the asteroid that's twice the size of the Great Pyramid of Giza. According to NASA, there are more than 25,000 asteroids near us of 140 meters in size at a minimum. Additionally, there are plenty of other near-Earth objects that could be a threat to our planet. One of these goes by the name of 4 Vesta, and it's so big that it can be seen in the night sky as if it was hovering nearby. Thousands of these asteroids can be found scattered across our entire solar system. The majority of them can be found in the main asteroid belt, which is located between the orbits of Mars and Jupiter. NASA are constantly scanning the sky for near-Earth objects, and this is due to the fact that many of these can cause harm to our planet. Scientists have recently reported that a massive object that could change our understanding of history is hidden beneath the Antarctic ice. These claims have caused theorists to speculate about what could be lying under the ice. This mysterious anomaly is believed to be underneath an area called Wilkes Land. The area is over 150 miles across and has a minimum depth of around 2,500 feet. Interestingly, researchers have suggested that it could be the remains of a giant asteroid. If this is the case, it would have been more than twice the size of the asteroid that struck Mexico 66 million years ago. This could help to answer one of the planet's most mysterious events. During the Permian-Triassic, a massive extinction event happened. It caused over 96% of Earth's sea creatures and over 70% of the vertebrate organisms living on land to perish. This giant rock could have been behind that event. This mysterious anomaly was first brought to the attention of researchers in 2006. This was when NASA's satellites picked up on gravitational changes. NASA are always picking up on near-Earth objects, and although the majority of these will never come into contact with our planet, it's important to log them and keep an eye on them as they could change paths. NASA have also said it makes their job easier as they have trackers across the planet, and they have scientists at work countless hours in order to pick up on these celestial bodies. However, the worrying factor is that many of these near-Earth objects aren't detected until the last minute, meaning that if one was ever to go on a collision course with our planet, we wouldn't have very long to prepare for it. This is exactly what happened back in June. An asteroid that's been given the name of 2020 LD passed by us within the Moon's distance, but NASA researchers didn't see this asteroid coming. It passed by us on the 5th of June, but it wasn't discovered until the 7th of June, meaning we are very lucky that it passed by us and wasn't a threat. It passed within 190,000 miles or 306,000 kilometers. And although that sounds like it's nowhere near us in terms of space, that's really close. One thing astronomers and researchers have said is that it's important to conduct further tests. When they're first picked up on, the researchers are on a time limit to try and understand their flight path. Detecting a celestial body early on is essential to understand what its behavior is like. Researchers noted that back in 2018, we saw more than 91 near-miss hits of different asteroids of all sizes passing by our fragile blue planet. The worrying thing is that out of these 91 asteroids that passed by us, only 30 of these asteroids were seen coming prior to their passing, and only 2 of those were discovered 1 year ahead of the near-miss event. This means that for more than 89 of the asteroids nearly striking Earth in 2018, only 2 of them could have been prevented with our current technology, showcasing just how threatening these large celestial bodies can be. As of right now, scientists and researchers have said it's important for us to be constantly scanning the skies. Just because we've logged thousands of these celestial bodies, it doesn't mean that everyone is accounted for. Some slip through, and this could be dangerous. After all, an asteroid of a length of only a few hundred meters could potentially wipe out an entire city. It's also interesting to note that space agencies are working on ways to break up asteroids if they're on a collision course. So what do you guys make of this recent announcement that an asteroid the size of the Great Pyramid is heading towards Earth's orbit?